Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to wrap up today with a special selection, which is where one of you tell me exactly what it is I need to check out. Today's comes at us from Martin. Hi, Bryan. Please react to Disfear, Phantom. Thank you and enjoy. All right, let's dive into it. I have no idea what's going on with this. I don't think I've ever checked out the band before. That's a black metal looking album cover if I've ever seen one though. Man. Although I can read the logo, so maybe not. Anyways, let's dive in, see what Disfear has in store for us today. Okay, probably not black metal. Okay. Those little guitar interjections remind me of like some classic hard rock. But everything else about this is very punky, but with a metal production, so like metalcore maybe?
The
Dude, this song does not let up. Of course, as soon as I say that. At least we're getting back into it. Well, if you weren't awake yet, you probably are now. That track, from the very start, just pure intensity. And really, a lot of it comes down to the drum part, which is incredibly consistent. There's like one main drum idea in here. We do get a couple of other variations. The opening 90 seconds or so has a building up of drum ideas before we get into the very traditional syncopated punk pattern that we see throughout the rest of the track. And there are tons of drum fills in here that help break that up too, but I'd say a majority of this time is that syncopated bass kick against the snare accents. And it's just super consistent and driving because at this tempo you end up hearing a lot of drum part very quickly. You know, usually I like to sort of like beatbox out a rhythm or maybe like pad a rhythm out on my chest to kind of showcase what's happening, but honestly it's so fast I don't know that I'd be able to keep up. And that intensity is held throughout this entire track, and it really makes this song feel intense. This screaming, or I guess in this case, growling, I don't know if that's a low fry or if that's a true false chord. Either way, it is incredibly consistent. I'm not going to say that it is completely monotone, but I think as far as perceived pitch goes, it's all like generally around the same area. I don't really think it changes that much. And so you really you gotta be in love with that sound, man. To me, it became background noise. It became a static or a white noise that accompanied everything else, which doesn't help because the track is not very dynamic or contrasty. And the fact that the vocals, which even in something less dynamically written, tend to be more dynamic themselves, um, that weight was not upheld by the vocals. It really wasn't upheld by anything. It wasn't until the end of the track when we started to get a series of guitar solos that I felt the song finally started to pique my interest beyond intensity and drive and groove. But the drums and the vocals do a great job of creating this weight paired with, I suppose, an aggression that lends itself well to this sort of ferocious movement. The high tempo plus the yelling is just wild. And it drives the song forward really well while creating this, I don't know, it's like a downward pressure, but it's also just accelerating, man. It just launches you through this track. On the other side of the equation, we do have the guitars and bass. Not a lot goes on here. We got some cool riffs up front in the first 90 seconds, but once the song kicked off with that opening verse, much like how the drums kind of locked into a single pattern that dominated most of what was left of the song, the guitars also stuck to a 4-chord progression, one of descent. I kind of pointed this out. I suppose that was like 5 or 6 minutes into the track, where we start from a lower note, go to a higher note, a lower note, a lower note, come up a little bit, and then drop back down to that first one so we can do the jump again. So a lot of it is just downward movement. Whatever they're talking about, I'm going to assume thematically it is about a descent, it's about a downfall, it's about a downward spiral. Just negativity in general is what I get out of this. We don't have a lot of upward movement or positive sounds harmonically coming from this. That does change a little bit when we get to the solos, and I would say maybe even the little ornamental melodic licks that we had in the first verse, I think it was, that I pointed out, that kind of reminded me more of hard rock, which is interesting too, because a lot of this song it feels very punky to me. You got the punky drums, you got the 4-chord progression, you got the shouting. This is hardcore punk. I'd say that the guitar production lends itself more towards metal. It sounds metal, but is compositionally punky. So I'm kind of thinking metalcore, like true classic definition of metalcore, of merging punk and metal. But then we get these ornamental hits in the guitars, and this reads as hard rock to me, classic hard rock, not like turn of the century hard rock, like the original hard rock. And I find that interesting because there's a bluesiness to it. It kind of dips its toes outside of the harmonic palette that the 4-chord progression uses to explore something bluesier. I'm not going to call it blues. I'm not going to call it blues rock, but it is leaning towards a bluesier idea. And I think you can hear this pretty clearly in the solos too. There's a lot of bending going on in there. There's a lot of more negative connotations as far as emotions go. It feels like it wants to be blues without ever really dipping its toes into that full blues scale. It still wants to keep that metallic pentatonic thing going on, and the punky simplicity. But it is interesting to hear those. I think they sounded like an ultra distorted, down tuned, uh, I don't know, uh, influenced by Smoke on the Water, maybe. Deep Purple is kind of what I got out of some of those licks. I don't know if anyone else heard that too. It was a bizarre parallel to draw while I was listening to that. Maybe less on the solos, but more on those ornamental hits coming in during the verse, I think it was. But the thing is too is that Smoke on the Water is a 4-chord blues track, so I think that might be why I kind of associate it with bluesier sounds too, because those moments are pulling from an influence that to me my parallel is a bluesy track. So it's a really bizarre thing. Like the punk and the metal, I'm like, yeah, okay, I've heard that many times. Maybe not this punky. I think this is more of that classic metalcore sound that I don't have a lot of experience with. But those ornamental hits, man, they feel so out of place. The solo feels a little out of place too. And that's about the entirety of the song. I thought the solos were well done. They have a lot of directionality to this whole song, has directionality and momentum, but it's just kind of that. It is angry, it's aggressive, and it's momentous. It is quick, and it just gets I mean, I'm also going to say though that despite the tempo being as fast as it is, and maybe actually because the tempo is as fast as it is, this feels like a really long 7 minutes. I found the opening 90 seconds to be pretty lengthy too. I think because so much of that was based around two main guitar licks, so we really spend a lot of time getting through each of them. They're longer phrases already as they have 4-chord progression to them, and then we also listen to each one 4 times. So again, a lot of repetition going on in there. And I found that to be a little indulgent. I'm not one who typically shies away from longer songs or longer intros, but I do shy away from heavy repetition. And I do feel like that is something that, especially classic metal, no, let me take, well, maybe some classic metal, but particularly thrash. I remember hearing a lot of this in Metallica's work, just playing the same riff over and over and over. And Metallica was heavily influential, and I feel like a lot of people ended up picking up on that and running with it. And metal kind of has, I don't want to call it a problem, it is a personal problem of heavy repetition sort of bogging down pacing. I don't feel like the opening of this was paced very well, but I'm sure if you're a metalhead who loves the idea, like that riff is sick, I could listen to it all day, like that's your stance on it, this was probably not long enough. Subjectivity and all that. But I did find that the uniform singularity of this track made it feel like it was 14 minutes long instead of 7. Which is interesting too, because when you take out the intro and the outro, which was a little different, although I did enjoy the dual layer of the vocals and guitar in the outro, that was pretty cool. We really only have like 4.5 minutes of that driven section in the middle, that singular concept. But it felt so long to me because, like I said, the vocals weren't adding variety. The guitars were just chord progressions. The drums were just that pattern. There wasn't a lot to break it up. Maybe there's a purpose for that. Maybe it's just the music they make. Let's dive into some lyrics, see what's going on there. This is a track about the current state of power imbalance within life and society. The chorus is an explanation of all the ways that the bottom 99% end up suffering in this system. It says the medication, the guilt, the low self-esteem, the nervous sweat, the sleeping troubles, the cancer, the heart attacks, the early death, the end of justice, the radiant fires, the waste that's left behind in the all-cleansing flames, the poisonous fumes from our own funeral pyres, and the pesticides that we inhale. Just rapid fire listing all of these. The second verse says, we feed the machines with our blood and our sweat. Gathered in flocks, they watch over our steps. Our intellect, it must not be awakened. With their broken promises, your broken backs. All who question their methods, their reasons, and their ethics are silenced by the crack of the whip of progress. Yeah, they have some very strong feelings about this, and they're just going into it pretty hard. And that's what this track is about. The bridge is just a repetition about all who question them are silenced by the whip of progress. We see the chorus repeated several times throughout this. The first verse just simply states that we've become too complacent. The hearts of men have grown tired and weak. Welcome to all forms of corruption. We're blind to everything except power, profit, and gain, and we will happily decorate our tombs with all of our earthly possessions. There's this brilliant art of illusion, and it perpetuates the cycle. All surface, no depth. Without destitution, there would be no sickening wealth. There's a lot of lines here, but ultimately, a lot of it ends up getting repeated. They really want to hammer that chorus home. that through all of this endless chasing of wealth and profit, it ends up destroying everyone. A track like this lines up really well with some of the tracks from Ash Inspire's work, particularly off of their Hostile Architecture album. And it's very much about class division and the increasing dangers and increasing destruction of those who aren't part of the ruling class, and all of the ways that our everyday life is designed to break us down mentally, emotionally, and physically. All right, this is Phantom by the band Disfear. What did you think of this? Is there anything that stood out to you? Anything that you'd like to add on to what I said or correct me on? Do you have your own take, perspective, or opinion on this track? Let me know. Put all of that, as well as anything else you'd like to, into the comments section below. Above that, in the description box, you can find a link to Linktree. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more in there. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. Wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow, though, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC as usual. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening whenever you choose to watch my videos.